Hi everyone, welcome to the new tutorial. This one's all about artist hacks, which are kind of like shortcuts for us artists, I suppose. I'm going to show you a lot of the things that I've learnt over the years, stuff that might speed up your process and help you get through your work a bit quicker. You might find out a few things you didn't know before. It's also a good guide for any beginner artists. So I'm going to go through a lot of different stages. I'm going to start with one of my favorites, Liquify in Photoshop. And then I'll talk about setting up references for inspiration. I'll touch a little bit on brushes. I'll talk a bit about sketching and then outlines. I'll talk about all the different layer modes. I also did a section about creating a ground, like an easy way to do a ground of like asphalt or you know, a rough texture. I also show you an easy way to set up flat colors, and then I finish it with the flash and how to do those speed effects. So it's quite random really. I tried to go in some kind of order, but I really just wanted to touch on a lot of different things, and I'm going to treat this like a part one, so I can do a part two next time. Alright, let's get into it. Let's talk about Liquify. Liquify can be your best friend. It's literally one of the best things you can use in Photoshop if you want to add some more energy to your character. So if I had Spider-Man here, which has already got, you know, I've sketched this up. This is from a previous tutorial that I've grabbed, and it's already got some nice flow through it, but what if I could make this totally different and add a lot more energy just by playing with Liquify and literally just dragging down certain parts of the legs. Let's make him like super lanky. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm literally just using the warp tool and just pushing around things, like sizing up my brush quite large and moving large portions of the body, and I'm thinking about flow. And I'll press OK and we'll just see what changes we've got there. So before I started it was that, and now we've got something like this. And I've just kind of really pushed those legs out a lot more, trying to get a lot more of an animated look. And what if we went one more and went absolutely bonkers with it? Sometimes it's worth just like seeing what it might look like and not holding back. Because usually we might hold back a little bit and not want to go too far. But what if this time we go far and we go as crazy as we can think of? There we go. I actually like that way more. So before we even started, it was like that. And now we've got that. So I've really exaggerated it. And I feel like exaggerating it has really just helped that a lot more. So I just wanted to see what it might look like if I add in an arm stretching out that way. Now that I've really got those legs bending up. But anyway, you get the idea. So, and Liquify is great for any sketch that you feel like just doesn't have enough energy. So you can just start warping and until you feel like you're really happy with it. So I'll see what I can do with this Venom. See, that was the original and now. So I feel like I've got a little bit more energy in there and just flow in that whole overall sketch. And that's a pretty dramatic difference as well. So yeah, Liquify, definitely worth a try. Let's talk about using references. And I think this is a very important step. This is what I do. References are very important and really good for inspiration when you're in the setup stage and you're about to start planning. So here's something that I would do. I was planning out my No Way Home picture for Spider-Man No Way Home, and I would just lay out a big sheet of references that I found online, and that just helps boost, you know, my imagination and the setup, and you know, what am I going to do? And like, I also look at things like energy in Spider-Man, all these different pictures with lots of energy, and just the way they're interacting and things like that gives me a little spark and a little idea, especially when, and then you've got things like the lizard. How does he look? How, you know, what's his proportions look like? So when I'm sketching, I really know what I'm going to do. And it's just like a big mishmash of everything all combined into my brain, and then I just spew it out onto the paper. So I highly recommend spending a good 15, 20 minutes, even half an hour, just looking for references online and lay them all out like this. Put it on a second monitor or something like that, just next to you, and just start drawing. I think you'll find that it really helps your imagination and just gives you a lot of inspiration. Let's talk about brushes. A lot of people think you need these amazing brushes to just create some good art, but it's not the case at all. I literally use the default brushes that have come with the program. I have for years and years. I use one that's got hard edges, but it's a soft brush, which you can see here, and it's opaque. The harder you press, it gets stronger and more solid. And then the softer you press, the more opaque it goes. And that's a really good one that I like to use. I also use a soft brush. So I use a soft brush for when I'm doing some soft shading, and that's pretty basic. And then I literally just use a nice sharp normal brush. This is a default brush that comes with Photoshop. So that's all I use. I do my inking in Clip Studio Paint. So this all here with Killer Croc was done in Clip Studio Paint. But yeah, I just wanted to explain that. That's literally the 3 brushes that I would use when doing any of my pictures. The rest that I would use would just be brushes like grunge brushes and things for extra effects and things towards the end. But that's just like a bonus. Any grunge brushes, things like that, that's just for like texturing and like a little bonus add-on. To actually create like a full piece like this, he was literally done with, yeah, those 3 brushes that I mentioned. Even the little sketchy details that you can see there is just done with a normal brush. Texturing is a totally different thing. That's like a wraparound texture. Same with the bands and things like that. So just wanted to point that out. One thing I want to talk about sketching is to really break it up into 3 different stages. So this is referring to my Carnage tutorial that I did a while ago. And you can see here, I'm obviously doing some roughs, keeping it super loose and super rough. And then we get into the tighter pencils kind of stage where you're just sketching, and it's just, now you've got a guide with that first one, you can really start to refine a little bit more and start to hone in on those details and anatomy. Now I'm starting to think more about the muscle tones and where the exact anatomy starts to go. And you can see, like, just refining, just keep going with it and going with it. And then I'll have a fully detailed and sketched out character here, but you can see it's obviously still quite rough. But that's where we get to stage 3. So I've got the rough kind of sketch that's now detailed enough. I need to fade it back, and then this is where we start to do the proper inking process. And then you've got a really good guide to do a really detailed character that's fully fleshed out. You can really hone in on those details, and that's how I would do a character of this level that needs that super high level of detail. I basically just break it up into three stages. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And it's probably the best way that you could tackle inks and making sure that you get the best out of it. And as you can see here, I really hone in on tiny little details that weren't in the original sketch, but this is just where you can start to get your imagination and run wild with it. And you basically, yeah, just have fun with it from here and think of these tiny little details. But yeah, if you ever want to check out this tutorial, it was part of my Carnage high detail tutorial where we went in super in depth with all those little nitty gritty details. Even went as far as doing all the tiny little muscles that you can see all around there, all those little bits that look like, yeah, that symbiote goo that's like really stretchy and it acts as muscles. So we went into all of that. So yeah, check it out. When sketching, a really good tip is to make sure you flip your image every now and then, and you can see the errors. So if you just do a free transform of the overall sketch, right click on it and press flip horizontal. It's a really good way to see any errors that you may have made, because your eye usually will adjust to your original a bit too much, and sometimes things might look correct, but by flipping it you can see the errors. See, I probably would have thickened out some more hair around here and things like that. It even works really well for really large pictures as well, and just flipping that, and you can see the overall composition and if anything's wrong. I just find that can be a really good way to, yeah, just get better judgment on your sketches. Let's just say you were going to draw a character that's cropped off and it's going to be just maybe a torso or a body like this. I highly recommend not doing it like this. Don't sketch and just judge by eye the crop already. Best thing you can do is draw a character full body. Here's one that I've done before. It was supposed to be Moon Knight. It's just it's super rough. But the best thing you can do is actually draw the entire body first, then crop later. And that's the best thing you can do. And you'll get a much better outcome and more accurate proportions as well. So, because you're judging things a lot better when you're drawing the whole body itself, and then you can just crop it in a bit later. There we go, and I've just put a grey border around it so you can really see that kind of crop. And the frame, this is our working space in here. And yeah, you can see now. So this is actually another Moon Knight that I sketched over based off that original, that first drawing there. And this one might work a little bit better for this setup, I reckon. But yes, as I mentioned, I highly recommend drawing it a full body first, making sure the proportions are exact and the right perspective and everything. You can judge it way better with your eye, and then crop it in, and then do your final touches. And once you're done and you're happy with your setup, you can literally just crop it in and it's ready to go. And then you can do all the final touches and rendering. So the best idea for a setup, yeah, is to draw from a distance first. Here's a nice little trick when it comes to line work. So let's just say that you've just completed your character, you've done all the inking, and you're pretty happy with it. You've got all these nice thin details, but what if you wanted to add some thicker, bolder ones around just the outside of the character to really hold it together? Well, I'll show you a quick hack on how to do that in just a few clicks. So what we're going to do is go over here, and I'm going to select the magic wand tool. And then over here, we need to make sure that we are on my outlines layer, and then holding shift, and then click on any white space around your character. So click in there. That has now made a selection around our character. If I hold shift and click again, I like doing that because it really hugs in a little tighter on those outlines just by holding shift and doing that. I need to make sure that we're filling in any spots like this. So hold shift, and I'm going to click in that area. We don't want to have any gaps missed out. I also need to check the character and make sure that there are no line breaks where the selection has broken through and coming in, inside the character where we don't want it to be. Okay, now that I've got my selection on the outside, I'm going to go Control Shift I, which is going to invert that selection. Come over here. I need to make a new layer above and put that underneath. One last step that I need to do now that we've got our layer ready is go up to Select, Modify, and contract it by 1. And that is going to tuck that selection underneath the outlines more. So now that I've got that, let's just fill it with black. And now we have a black silhouette. Go to Fill, take it to 0, and then double click on the layer style to bring up a layer style. And have a look at our character here. All right. And then we're going to click on stroke, and that's going to put a nice thick stroke on the outside of our character. We can make it really bold. You can make it not so bold. So you don't want to go too crazy with it. I'll zoom out so you can see. Have a look at that. So I really like seeing that from a distance like that with the boldness. We've got these really nice thin details on the inside of the character. And now we've got this really thick outline on the outside of the character to hold it all together. And have a look at that hair. Like, I really love that boldness around the outside and then those thin lines in the middle. This character is really held together now. It makes it look way more professional. Now what you should do, I recommend, is go over to the layer with the layer style and rasterize it. So rasterize layer style, that's going to make it now flat. So I can pull that out and you can see those outlines that we've added on the outside. But what you should also do is get a brush, a hard brush, and just make sure that you're not, like, see this arm coming down and past the hair? Kind of looks weird how it's thick there and then it's all of a sudden back to that original thin. So I need to make sure that some parts are consistent. But that's just a quick hack to, if you've done your inks and you feel like it's finished and you're happy with it, you've got all these nice thin, nice details all through your character, have a look at it one more time and think, oh, does that need some bolder lines around the overall character? And give it a try and see what it looks like. And I bet you'll be a lot happier by adding just a little bit of a thin line on the outside, even if it was only 2 pixels extra. Anyway, I think that's a lot better. So I'll zoom out and check this out. So if I hide that layer and then show it. So you see the difference? And like that little fix that I just did up around that waist that the stroke did not do, that's also made a difference by thickening that up. Just making sure I keep the consistency going. Anyway, there's a nice little quick one for you. I tell you what, it's better than manually going around and doing some thicker lines by hand. So yeah, definitely use that stroke. Let's play around with some layer blending modes. So over here, above your layers, you've got this little tab here and it pulls down. I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with this, but I'd like to go through it and talk about a few of them one by one for those who aren't familiar. So we've got Moon Knight's inks here, and let's just say you've got some line art and it's complete, and let's just say you did your inks on paper or something and it's got a white background, you've scanned it in and it's got the black inks on a white background, and you want to remove that white background so you can start painting. You click on your layer and you just put it on multiply. This is where multiply is really good. Have that assigned to your layer, and then underneath you can start painting and your colors will show through. Another good layer style I want to talk about is screen. So if you come over here, this is my Doctor Strange artwork. If I make a new layer above it and change that layer to screen, I can then maybe sample one of these nice warm colors, like an orangey, creamy kind of color, size it up. It works really well for lighter kind of colors. So imagine if I had a really nice kind of beam of light coming through behind him, and then I can also overlap a little bit onto his cape, and that's going to look quite nicely doing that kind of thing, you know. And it even works really well for magic powers. So if I was to sample maybe this kind of red or more into the orange, like the power, and then paint that screen over the top of that, the power is now more ambient and looks, yeah, a bit better. So I actually quite like that a lot more than what it was at the start. So screen is really good for that kind of stuff. Let's talk about soft light. So this Fallout artwork, it's really old. This is really, really old, but I'm going to use it to duplicate my layer. So I'm making a copy of my layer, and on that top one, I'm going to change that to soft light, and I'm going to show you the kind of effect that it can have. It's especially good for any image that you think might look quite dull once you're complete, and you feel like your picture just doesn't have that oomph. I always like to put a new layer over the top with the soft light assigned to it. It's a duplicated layer, sorry. And then play around with the levels and then see what you can end up with. And you will end up with something that's more vibrant. It might have a little bit of density to it, so make sure the shadows aren't too dark. And yeah, just play around with the levels. Press OK. Also, start playing around with the saturation on your layer, and you'll start to get something that's quite nice and more vibrant. So if I hide that, that's what it was, and that's what it is now. You can see the vibrancy that soft light has given that. And I use that a little bit to add some final touches to any artwork. Another way to use screen or lighten is I'm going to use this Thanos artwork here. I've got a photo here from Google of just some embers, and it has to have a black background for this to work. And basically anything that's black will disappear and go transparent, and all these colors will stay. So change that layer to screen or even lighten, and then you're left with these embers. So that's lighten and that's screen. So you can kind of see the difference. I think screen has a little bit better, like it really lets the soft colors come through a little bit more. And then you can place those embers any way you like, and I feel like that works really nice. Let's talk about overlay. So overlay is pretty cool. So here's Bane. What if I had a texture? Overlay is really good for kind of textures, anything like that you want to put over the top. Let's put that over the top of him, change it to overlay, and you can see it's kind of adding it onto him, giving him that kind of frosted look. Maybe we're going to turn him into Mr. Freeze now. So you can kind of see how that works there. So yeah, overlay is not too bad. Let's talk about color. So if I make a new layer above my Swamp Thing and then change that layer mode to color, this is really good for having color breaks. So if I get a nice brush, I'll zoom in. Let's just say he's like a bit too green or something, and I want to go more into the browns. So I'll pull that down into more of the brown kind of color and start painting on this new layer. And you can see I can now change the color of these branches maybe that are on him, and do it that way. Or if I want his eyes to be more red, and we'll bring that right up into the reds and then zoom into his eyes, and then I can start painting over the top, and I'm going to get these like pinkish reddish kind of eyes, things like that, you know. What if we went absolutely extreme and started turning all these veins into red veins? So you can really see the effect that can have just by changing that layer mode to color. This is extreme. It doesn't make any sense to have these red, but you get the idea of the effect that I'm trying to go for there. So yeah, color is a really good one. I want to show you a nice little final touch on any picture that you do. So let's just say that you've just finished something. Here's Nathan Drake. This is an old picture I've done. I think I did it back in 2015. And let's just say it's all done and you want to add a nice final touch. Best thing that you can do, is what I've learned over the years, get a nice soft brush, size it right up, make a new layer above, like this is just flattened. This is just the entire finished picture. Make a new layer above it, set the layer mode to linear dodge. And then it does take time to get used to this, but what you do is basically you want to select, like, sample colors from areas in the picture and then paint softly over them. The way it works with linear dodge though is you have to have a really deep dark color. So let's just say if I sampled the sky, for instance, and then I went over to the sampling, you always do this, go down here, but bring it really deep and deep blue. So like this. I know it's kind of weird, but this is how it works with the linear dodge. And then start painting up the top and you see what it's doing, that vibrance. So you can actually add that in like that. I might even move that up into more of a purple when I get closer to the sun and start to really think about that. Here's the sunset. So I'm going to sample that pinkish kind of tone and again, bring that down into that deep red and then paint over again. And you see that effect? Like, have a look at that effect that I'm getting now. It's like a really nice sunrise, or sunset, I should say, on his arm. So trying to revamp this picture basically. And again, go over here, sample like a green of that. Now go into the deep, deep dark greens. That's what you have to do. Size it up, brush over this way where the jungle might be, and you get a nice kind of, we're not going to go too crazy, but that's, you get what I mean. And down here in the deep jungle, I'm going to sample that, bring it down, and then brush down in there. And I like that kind of bluish tone that it's doing for me down there. So I really like that. And again, I'll just keep that continuing into that distance behind. Best thing you can do is do it on a gun blast. You can really sample like that red tone. Again, make sure it's brought down into a deep dark color. And then size the brush up. And then brush over the gun blast like a weapon. And then drag that out to where the shot comes out. And then you can see that, like, look how much that's a big difference on that weapon already. But yeah, you get the idea now, and I'm going to do it again and try and see if we can get some more green into that forest. And there we have it. So have a look at this difference. So before and after. So see that vibrance, that difference that I've got? So I've really just done a rehaul over this picture in a matter of minutes, like 2 minutes, just of using, literally just using linear dodge on a new layer with a soft brush. And understanding that you know those darker colors work with linear dodge, it really is a nice final touch to any picture that you do. Honestly, if you just finished a picture, try this out. Go over the top, try and see what it might look like if you add a nice layer over the top. So I'm actually much happier with this picture now that I've done that. So I'm probably going to save a copy of this, and that'll be good. All right. If you've ever struggled to get a good ground, I'm going to show you how to a quick way to do some good detailed grounds, you know, kind of just like this kind of stuff, textured, but, you know, don't want to make it look too real. You still want to have that kind of comic look like this. I'll show you a quick way to do it in getting these kind of nice textures that go through. Best thing that you can do is just get a nice image from, you know, Google, anything like that. Just something like this. We might even duplicate it and make it a little wider There we go. So I've just done 4 of them together now and merged them. So make it nice and big. You want to basically separate all the rocks so that they're not so large, you know. Anyway, so now what I'm going to do is I'll just duplicate that. So I've got a backup. And we're going to use this now. And basically, we don't want to have this realism. We don't want it to look super real. We're trying to get that kind of comic look. And then what we want to do is just get this whole thing, do a Control T, which is free transform. And I'm basically just going to pull these down. We're going to get a nice perspective going. Just think of something like an eye level view, and that kind of perspective. So let's just do that. And we'll pull this right out. Don't be afraid to exaggerate it. You can see those rocks are starting to look pretty cool up in the foreground here. And they get further and further away as they go. So let's do something like that. Okay, now I'm just going to duplicate this to keep it back up. And then I'm going to go up to Filter, Filter Gallery, and play around with some filters here. So you see cutout is really good for this. I'm taking the levels right down to maybe 5 and the simplicity way up. So I might go simplicity 6 and play around with the fidelity. Okay, I'm going to press OK and you can see the difference. So that's realistic and that's now what we've got, this kind of comic look. Now I want to get that backup version, put it above this and show it. So there it is. That's the backup version, which was the photo. And now again, I'm going to do another, I'm going to actually go down to filter, blur, and motion blur. So this is just a second version, and I'll show you what we're going to do. We're going to blend them together a little bit. Now I'm blurring this out, quite dramatic, maybe about there. And it has to be flat at 0 angle. We don't want to have any kind of angle like this. It won't work. The effect that I'm going for. Okay there, and filter gallery again, and we'll do another cutout, and this is a different variation of it. I might even have the simplicity up to about 8. Okay, press OK, and then we've got this version. So we've got that version and we've got this version. And what I want to do now is I'm just going to put that layer underneath, and I want to kind of take the opacity of this one down and see if we can just get a nice blend of that one underneath. And there's a reason that I liked this version. I just like how sometimes it's broken up and it also goes back in the perspective. So that's what I'm going for. So the top one's now not so strong because I'm fading it back a little bit, blending them two together basically. Now I'm going to merge them together, and then again I want to do another filter gallery. So if I just keep going with it and take the levels up this time so that we can actually see what it looks like. And I'll press OK again. And what that's done is it's starting to simplify it and soften it out a lot more, because before it's still too real. Like, it's good, but it just depends what level you want to go at. And if I go again, and we'll go filter gallery, but this time we might try a different thing like dry brush or paint daubs, and just play around with all of this. Might take the brush size right down, maybe there. And I kind of don't mind that because it's starting to really have that more painted look. And what if I go again over this, but this time we'll go poster edges, and then we'll see what we can get out of this one. And then what if I go motion blur on that, and we start to blur this out sideways. And what it's doing is it's keeping these black streaks, which is nice. So what if I did an exaggerated version, like really crazy, and then again, we go back into filter gallery and check out what cutout looks like. Or back into posterization again, and press OK, and then fade that back down. You start to see what you can get. And then I want to try something else out. So if we duplicate this, so we've got a copy, and go down to blur again, and we'll do another motion blur on what we've got. Doesn't have to be too dramatic, about there maybe. But then press OK, go back up to filter gallery again, and we'll go down to poster edges this time. So this one's going to look pretty cool. This is where we start to get something that we want. So I've actually got the edge thickness up to 6, which is pretty good. The edge intensity can be 0, but posterization is what's interesting, because the more you go, so if you go posterization up to 5, that doesn't really show that much, but if you go down low, it starts to look like a comic cutout kind of style. It's almost better. Sometimes this can be better than the cutout section itself. So posterization or poster edges here. Press OK. And that's kind of pretty cool. So now that we've got that copy, I kind of prefer that than that. So that's the one that was the other version. So what you can do, because see this, I love how it's got these like nice shaded areas, but then it's got these nice highlighted areas that are broken up into cool sections as well. So if you really want to, you can actually get the one on top, which is this posterization version, and take the opacity down just a bit to start blending with the one underneath. And then you'll get a few of these textures to show here. You see that? So without that, I didn't have any of those textures. And then with, starting to get a few of those little textures coming in from the layer underneath. So there we go. If I just leave that, and we'll merge them together now. And then the final thing that you can do is duplicate it again. I know there's a lot of duplication, but it all adds up. Get your dodge tool now. This is the final part of it. So get your dodge tool and highlight, whoops. Make sure you've got a nice soft brush in that dodge tool, bump it up a bit, and then just highlight in some areas where you want it to, just say the sun's shining most, maybe through the middle of that, up the road, and then darken the edges. So I'll get the burn tool now. Maybe I'll have it set to mid-tones, and I'll just start burning making sure I've got a soft brush again, burn them sides, and then again, just making sure that wherever I want it to be nice and bright, just in the middle there, is working well. There we go. Just trying to make it look like a more natural ground. So before I did any of that lighting, we had that, and now we've got that. So it looks a little more natural now. All right, so now that I've got that, I'm going to just see what it looks like if I do another filter gallery over it, because when you start to lighten things, these filters they take effect. So have a look at that. I think that's pretty cool now. I'm going to press OK. And then I can actually show the two. So it's working now, and it's got this kind of cool comic effect about it. And because I used my dodge tool to lighten certain areas, and then I did that filter, it's giving me this cell shaded lighting effect. So it's got that soft lighting, and it's turned it into a cell shaded version. So it's actually getting these details coming through here. So that's pretty cool. So remember that. I want to just show you what I mean about that again. So let's just say this is basically a flat color. If you start darkening edges on something, wherever it is, and then you lighten the middle, exactly like we just did with the ground, because I don't feel like I explained it enough. And just so you had the lightened bit in the middle, and then you do that filter, have a look, and press OK. Do you see what I mean? So it's these filters actually start to cell shade your lighting. So before it's soft, and then you do them filters and it's like really light. That's the same effect it did here, but with these rocks and all those details in on it as well. So that's a good way that you can do a background of a ground. I'll just show you one more thing, and we'll put a layer underneath this. I'm going to sample just this medium kind of brown tone and just fill it underneath. So it's literally just like that. But what I want to do is show you, just bring that layer back above. And what if we just take the opacity down just a bit, maybe down to about 70%, because we kind of want to, you don't want to have it super harsh. You don't want to have it super obvious. So by me doing that, so that's the layer underneath, and then we've taken the opacity down on this top one. I feel like that is really necessary, because we just don't want this to be super harsh and super obvious. So just keep that in mind if you're ever going to do this with one of your pictures. See, before it was that, and now it's that. Do you see that? See the difference in harshness? I much prefer the softer version, more subtle. And if you have a look at any of these other backgrounds, you can see what I mean. Let your line work do the detailing, and then it's way more comic-like. So let the line work take over, and then the detail of the ground, you can see I've done it here. I've got some nice textures going through. So that's the same kind of thing. And then get your brush, and even like here I had to paint things like that. Start doing the more artistry kind of stuff there. But the shortcut basically is to get a quick textured ground. Same kind of thing here. I think I did a motion blur sideways on some stuff, and then I had a quick background done of a ground, sorry, and then I would draw my outlines over the top. And get creative and start doing my own rocks and things like that. And basically you've just got a nice head start by doing that ground the way I just showed you. So yeah, I hope that helps. That's just another quick tip on how to do a ground and get a big head start on yourself. And like I said, you know, you would come in and you could start drawing in your own rocks and maybe start thinking about where some of these are placed from what you've got laid out here. So I'm kind of seeing a rock there, and then another one around here, and you could just start doing your own thing and going with the flow, basically trying to match kind of what you've got there, match that lighting, and then you've got a nice big head start, and you're good to go and start thinking about some detailing. That's just super rough, but you get the idea. And if you spend some time going through this whole background and really drawing out some rocks over the whole thing, you'll have a really nice, perfect looking background. And you are still putting in the hard work, it's just a nice head start. I just want to talk about flat colors and laying them out super quick. So here's a She-Hulk that I've worked on before, but what if we were starting from scratch? So let's just say you had your outlines, and the way I lay out my flat colors is I get my magic wand tool and I click in the white area on the outside, and I click 2 times holding shift just to make sure that that's snapped in, and then I press Control-Shift-I and invert, and then I go to select, shrink by 1 pixel, and that's really going to tuck that, the flat colors will be tucked under the outlines more. You don't want any of the colors to be coming out this way. Fill. Alright, so that's a quick way to lay out that flat color. That's done. And then make a new layer above. But when picking a color for your character, I just picked the majority. Like the white is probably what I see most here, so I just picked like a grey white kind of color there. I'm in Clip Studio Paint, by the way. That's kind of essential for this technique because their paint bucket in Clip Studio Paint is amazing, and I just don't know if Photoshop's really can do the same thing, because Clip Studio Paint, what they do is, let's just say if I sample that green skin color and then I fill into that, and if I fade down those outlines and you start to see the color underneath, you see that? You see it's actually tucking under the outlines, and Photoshop doesn't do that. Photoshop usually has them tucked right to the edge, and then you get this little hint of a white, you know, whatever's underneath it. It's just not, it's not perfect. So unless it's changed recently, I'm not quite sure what Photoshop's done, but yeah, I much prefer to use Clip Studio Paint. And then I'm using my paint bucket, and I can fully trust that wherever I click, even the little bits, I feel like it's really working for me. And this is just a super quick way to lay out all this skin here. And then I'll mix between a brush, so I'll quickly press B, get my brush, fill in underneath the eyes, and that's really just speeding it up for me. My skin's almost usually done. But yeah, I just feel like this is the absolutely quickest way to lay out any kind of flat colors. And then you'll just sample, like I'll sample that. You don't have to sample, you can just get from whatever you like. You can just judge it by eye, however you like to do it. Yeah, I just feel like that's just a really quick way of doing it. So yeah, I hope that helps. She's basically laid out apart from that other glove there, but you get the idea. That's kind of how I do my flat colors, and they can be done in a matter of minutes doing it this way. Before, it would probably take me 5 to 10 minutes. I used to literally get my lasso tool out and I would cut around a section, maybe that glove. And you can already see, like, by me just getting that paint bucket out and just pressing fill and trusting that it's tucking under those outlines, that would have been done already a long time ago. So that's the big difference between that. Alright, just for something different, I want to show you how I can get this flash blur. You see down here how I've got this nice blur going off the character. This is an older picture that I did a year or two ago. Let me show you how I did that. So I'll just hide that. We'll go back to our original flash. So it was a layer folder full of all this before, but let's just flatten that into one thing. And then we're going to come down here. I need to select maybe that whole leg just separately. Take that off, paste it back down. I need to be careful because it does leave this little cut line there. So I'll remember that. Okay, so the way that I would do it is I would get that main leg. Let's work with that first. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm then going to go up to filter blur, motion blur, and we need to try and match that angle. So I'm looking at this leg and then I'm thinking about that angle. So pull this to where you think that angle is, and I feel like that's about right. Yep. And we'll pull that. We're going to exaggerate that a fair bit. All right, press OK. So now I've got this nice blurred leg, and then you've got a sharp one underneath. But we basically need to have them work together. So on the leg that's sharp, we want to remove this section so that it's no longer there, and that we're only left with the blurred version. So use layer masks. That's what I do. So on the one underneath, I'll press a layer mask. I'll also put a layer mask on that top one. But on the bottom one, get your brush, and I will select a soft brush. Now, if you're not familiar with layer masks, they're basically a way of erasing part of your character or whatever it is. So it's a way to erase it, but not permanently erase it. So you have to use black. Black is basically the eraser. White is to reveal and make it back new again. So I've got black, and I've now got my brush. So every time wherever I brush, I'm going to remove that under one. Let me just hide that top layer so you can see what I'm actually doing. Now we need a nice gradient down so that it's not so like the same. There we go. So that'll do. We want it to gradually go up. So show that other layer. Now I'm going to go into the layer mask of that and start to remove the top half so that we get our clear leg back. So we're not done there. It still doesn't look right, because if you have a look, it is starting to show some of that backdrop through both of those, because they're not working perfectly together. And what I need to do is actually control click on that layer mask with the gradient on it, go down to this one, and this is going to help us line that up. And then I need to play around with the levels on that mask. So I actually pull the white up, and that's going to start to bring back, we're basically strengthening up the distance there. So press OK on that, and do the same on the other one with the levels, and just play around until you don't see the background coming through anymore, like that. There you go. So you see that? Now it's more perfect, and that'll work. So if I hide that layer, you can see that leg. And if I hide that layer, you can see how far that stretches. Now what we need to do is that exaggerated, those streaks there. You see that? So the way I did that, I actually sketched over the top, just roughly. And what I'll do now is I'll make a new layer above all of that, sample these like that yellow and a backup one of the red, and just start painting in big streaks. So really exaggerate it a fair bit. They can be pretty sharp. Try and make them as sharp as you can. And then, because we're going to blur these anyway, so it doesn't matter if they're rough. Try and do some thick ones and some thin ones, and then go filter, blur, motion blur. Really stretch it out like that. There we go. And then press OK when you're happy. And what I want to do now is go to the mask that is blurred. So this one, go to the layer mask, get that same sharp brush, and start removing sections of that foot as it goes up. And this is just going to add to that kind of effect. There we go. All right. So now what we're going to do is we'll put those in a layer folder of that whole leg. And I'll put a layer mask on that layer folder. And then with a nice big soft brush on that layer mask, and then with I'm going to use the gradient tool, and then I'm just going to pull that up until that leg starts to disappear as it gets further back. And that's kind of how I did that effect. I would also control click on that blurred leg, so that, and maybe the stretched out stuff, and then I have to make sure I've got that gradient on the brush. So I'm going to hold Control Alt and Shift on that layer mask, and you can see my selection. It's actually using the blur and everything. So I'm making a new layer above all of that now with a soft brush, sampling a nice blue, like a really strong blue. maybe like that. Set the layer mode to screen. And I'm setting the layer mode to probably lighten, I think, and then start brushing it over. And you can see that I'm now getting that nice blue effect up his leg. I want it to basically blend with the background. And what it's also doing is keeping in mind that nice blue streak. And it's working with that yellow and the red too. So play around the levels on that until I'm happy. And then, yep, I like that. Fade it down. And now we've got a nice blended leg. You see the difference with that extra blue effect over the top? And now it looks like he's really running super fast, and that leg is, it's kind of like the original. Well, there's the original there. That one actually had way more of an extreme blur on it in the original. But you get the idea. Yeah, so that's another little trick there. I hope that helps. Alright, well, that is it for this tutorial. I hope you got a bit out of that. I know there was a bit, like it was a bit all over the place, but that's what I kind of wanted to do. I just want to mix it up and do like a big compilation of all these different little artist tips. Maybe they will help you in some way. But like I said before, I kind of want to do a part 2, but I'll probably save it for a much later date. This was actually quite hard to prepare. I was sitting there racking my brain thinking, what could I share? But a lot of it, I think, comes as I'm drawing, and then things will hit me and I'll be like, I should share this. And so I haven't jotted that down in the past. So what I'm going to do now is actually, as I work and keep working and I come across these little things I want to share with you, I'm going to take note of these and remember them. And so that by the next time I come up with this tutorial again, part 2, I will actually have a list, I think, that should be a lot more interesting. Yeah, next time I'll be way more prepared, and yeah, it should be a lot better. We'll do a part 2. Alright, thank you everyone, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.